Good morning, and thank you for coming to the Policy Committee meeting of March 3rd. We are being live streamed and recorded for later viewing. If anyone has any questions, please use your microphone. And I will pass it over to Ms. Schaefer.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and audience members that are probably watching from home. I think many of the items that we'll be covering today are topics that we've previously discussed here, and also teeing up some conversations for our last two scheduled policy meetings this year, because as we all know, policies need two readings before they're adopted. Or so there's a first reading and a reading for adoption by the board. So we try to manage our time so that by the end of this year, some of those critical policies are put into place. So we want to talk about both, again, some that we've already touched on, and then the work we'd like to complete by the end of this year. So with that, I'd like to ask Mr. Frazier and Mr. Roos to start us off with policy 832, again, which we've looked at previously.
Good morning. As we previously discussed, this policy is the genesis of two things. One, the increasing amount of need for information security. Just yesterday, the White House declared ransomware a national threat. So it's continuing to be an issue for organizations, and that organizations are education as well. It's not like education is considered separate from that threat. In fact, many of the threat actors, bad actors, consider education to be data rich and soft targets. And there's actually even specific groups targeting education. The second reason for this policy was a change in Pennsylvania law, which I'm sure Ken can add to, but the notification requirements in the case of a data breach changed in Pennsylvania. So it was a twofold reason for the composition of this policy. You can see that there were some changes, an introductory sentence added, a little bit more springboard language for an AR, and also there was a question on page 2 about business relationships. So that was removed. And beyond that, that is the total of the edits.
And can I just add, because of the delegation of responsibility language, we will be adding an administrative regulation. Is that something we're planning to bring back before the end of this year, or?
Certainly hope to.
Okay.
It certainly needs an AR. The AR is going to be a little bit more comprehensive than this. There's a lot of facets and aspects about information security that need to be examined. But it's certainly my intent, my objective to bring back an AR.
Thank you.
Are there any questions? Okay.
On page 3, where we talk about electronic notice, what's the kind of material difference between the electronic notice and the substitute email notice? So in 3, that's just laying out what the, of the 3 ways, written, telephonic, and electronic, and then substitute notice if one of the following doesn't exist. And then in 2.1, it says email notice when the district has an email for it. But isn't that the same as the electronic notice? Or I'm just trying to understand what the difference is, if there is.
I'm gonna ask Ken to help me out here, but the original, the Pennsylvania law, the bill, it talks about if you achieve these levels, you have to do certain things. So I believe that, at least my read of this was, it was speaking more to the levels of the breach and how you have to communicate that as a result of the level of the breach. Ken, can you confirm that?
Yes, just generally speaking, most of this language is being driven by what's called the Pennsylvania's Data Breach Notification Law and the recent amendments that took place in 2023, by the way, which don't go into effect until May 2nd. So that gives you time to adopt this policy regulation. As far as the language about the email notice language, the question arose last week as to what that prior business relationship means in the context of a school district. That was in the language, that was in the statute before the amendment. Now that there's been a new expanded definition of electronic notice, which includes notification by email, you don't need that. You really don't need it anymore as a school district. It's now, it's basically ambiguous and confusing and unnecessary. So that's why we took it out.
Yeah, I was, and I think it's basically saying the same thing. I was just curious as to whether or not there was a difference, because it's listed under 3, the new language around electronic notice. In the substitute notice, there's number 1 is email when the district has an email address, but my question is, isn't that basically the same as what electronic notice is? I think it's kind of intuitive, but it feels redundant, but I don't know that
I agree. Yeah.
there's anything that we do about it. I mean, it's just what the step is.
If this is language directly from the law, that I guess we just leave it that way, but it is, to me, a little confusing as well.
Well, we can try to clarify it a little bit better in the AR. I'm reluctant to change the definition from what's in the law, but we can make it clear in the AR.
There's 2 periods at the end of that. Did we catch that? Yeah.
At the end of 3.
That's for number of people.
Oh, that's the number of people. The fact that classic persons to be notified exceeds 1 people. Are there any other questions? Okay, we don't have anyone in the audience at the moment, so I'm not asking for audience comments, but we'll move on to the next subject.
Okay, next for adoption or recommended for adoption is policy and AR 604, which is an existing policy with some updated language that I'd asked Mr. Roos to share. This is, I believe, what we reviewed last time.
Sure. Yeah, we did talk about this last month, I believe. The Act 57 of 2022, which becomes effective next year, requires the school district to waive additional charges on real estate tax of a taxpayer who failed to receive a tax notice. Used to be, our rule was, you're on notice. If you buy a piece of property and don't get a tax notice, it's on you. The state legislature has said no. We're going to, if you didn't get the tax notice, we're going to say you get a free pass. The district did make exceptions to that, by the way, in terms of if there was a hardship or they could be shown that they couldn't reasonably receive notice. Irrespective of that, the new rule is going to be now that it's automatic in that case. This regulations, or this policy still preserves the ability that already existed for someone to show, a residential taxpayer to show extraordinary circumstances as to why they didn't pay their taxes. And it has been invoked periodically over the years. So that's what this is. So there's no change. I don't think there's any changes from last month, though, in this. We do have a regulation now that goes with it. The regulation, as requested, now covers, the regulation as it was last month was just about the new automatic waivers. Now we've added a section that talks about what do we do with what we'll call the waivers, the traditional waivers, the ones that already existed. And we've even included in the form for those waivers, as well as a second form for the new automatic waivers. So that's what you asked us to do, and we've done it.
I was just going to say, I think that the clarifying wording that was added in is helpful.
So it's ready for adoption.
All right. So moving on to first readings for today, the items A, B, and C, I think, can be maybe considered together, and Mr. Roos could give us an overview of the changes in those, the trio of policies, though I would note that, and we should have made this perhaps another sub-topic here, item B, the policy AR 121, there's no proposed revisions there, so it should have been noted as a for review only, so we'll try in the future just to note that as a separate line item. Are you okay?
See that?
Would you be able to provide us a summary of those three, the changes that are proposed?
For the
items?
first readings,
For the first readings?
114.
114, individualized supports.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, they're the ones that are the redlined ones. Yeah,
Yes, so A, B, and C, but
they had mostly to do with field trips and extracurricular activities in terms of transportations. There's nothing really that changes anything that the district was already doing when it was feasible and possible. Basically, it's just simply making sure that there's equal opportunity to participate in extracurricular and interscholastic activities and that's including field trips and other things, having to do with transportations and other accommodations like having a nurse available, things like that. Again, nothing that changes anything that the district didn't already do when it was feasible or practical to do it.
And some of the language was brought forward, right? Like student with a disability instead of.
Oh, correct. You had asked,
Right.
this committee had asked that we update that language, and that's been done, and that was more than acceptable to the Office of Civil Rights.
and I'd also note that there is some overlap in the revisions to the policy AR 124 with the final first reading, which is home education. So there is some additional overlap there that we can call out when we get to that home education policy.
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite understand what you're.
So, for example, on page 29, that chart, that change relates to the home education changes in the law, correct? So I didn't.
Oh, yes, yes,
there's
yes.
some overlap there
Okay,
between the
yes,
two
yes.
subject matters.
Yes, good catch. That is That is a chart that we have been using as kind of a cheat sheet for people to, when they're trying to figure out who's eligible for what. And it just, for reasons completely unrelated to anything having to do with rights of students with disabilities. That chart needed to change because of the change made to policy, the changes proposed to be made to Policy 136, and the changes that have been made by Act 55.
I have a question. The individuals with disabilities education is usually referred to as IDEA, and here it is IDEIA. It's still the same thing, correct?
This one is, yeah, it's technically it is IDEIA. Individuals with Disabilities Education Act was the law that was passed back in the, I'm going to say early 90s. It was updated, I think, in kind of say like 97 to the Individuals with Education Improvement Act, but people still sometimes refer to it by the original name,
Okay.
IDEA. But it's either way is right. The one is the original law, and the second is the amended law.
Interesting. I've only heard it the first way. Thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, but I think that's why people were in the habit of calling it the IDEA and just didn't bother to put the I in, and that's, you'll see it both ways.
I had some questions on the field trip piece of it. I guess in the AR. I didn't see anywhere where it actually talked about the nurse piece of it, other than somewhere. And I just didn't know if that needed to be. So is it, I guess what I'm asking for is a better understanding of what are the nursing requirements around field trips?
There's something that should be addressed in the student's individualized plan, whether it's an IEP or whether it's a Section 504 service agreement. Those, whatever the plan is, should specifically address what the district's obligations are to provide nursing services during non-school times. So it really kind of depends on what the student's individual medical needs are. If there's a medication, for example, that is required to be taken by the student, and it can only be taken during the time, let's suppose there's an overnight field trip or something, and the student can't go a certain length of time, you might have to have a nurse because the student can't wait until the field trip is over to do it. On the other hand, if it's medication that should be taken, for example, daily or is typically taken daily, you don't necessarily need to provide a nurse just because a parent might prefer that the medication be taken at that time. It's just really going to be about what's in the student's individualized plan, which trumps everything because that's based on law.
So it's not that nurses need to be on every field trip. It's just if there is a student who requires a nurse.
Student or students who require a service that only nurses can provide.
Correct. Okay.
There can be other alternatives for providing services. I mean, have a physician on the trip, for example. But it's just the arrangements. You need, whatever the individual plan requires is when you're required to have the nursing or other services on the trip, activity, whatever.
Okay. So there's a sense among the community, well, among parents, I suppose, that schools are not doing field trips because of a nursing shortage, right? And I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head around that.
I can't speak to that. That's gonna, and I assume you just mean Laura Marion. Okay.
I mean, I think I can start, and if Dr. McGowan would want to jump in. I think post-COVID and even pre-COVID, we have historically had a lot of trips that are taken on any given day for a variety of purposes, whether it's a field trip, a class trip, an athletic event, a competition, that we do try to run. I certainly, and based on what Mr. Roos talked about in terms of those needs, every single trip needs to be planned with at the level of detail of each individual student to say, is there a requirement that we send a nurse? So there's a lot of planning involved in making these trips happen. And I certainly, I think we've made it known that the labor market across different sectors, including but not limited to nursing, to drivers, and our ability to make all of these trips happen is challenging. We also have made an effort to try to, over time, ensure that there are guaranteed experiences for students. So it may feel different than it used to because every teacher saying these are all the places I want to go, we've been trying to rein that in so that there's consistency in the experience that students have, so that there are some guarantees that everyone gets. So that makes it feel a little bit different too. And so I wouldn't want to just, nursing shortages aren't driving any of this. I mean, it's part of the puzzle, but it's far more complex than that. And also, given the direction we've been trying to head with some of this work, it just is going to probably feel like a different experience than maybe parents had in the past.
I mean, at some point in the future, we'll come back. We would like to come back with a revision to the field trip policy in general because, as Ms. Schaefer said, there's a lot of field trips that have gone out in this district, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, and a lot of them do require nursing support, and we need to think about transportation. So there are boundaries when we're thinking through how the field trips go out. We've prioritized our competitions, including both academic and sports competitions, so not one or the other. That's been definitely a priority. You've seen a lot of overnight field trips as well. And then we have our residencies that Ms. Schaefer talked about. So we've really tried to ensure this year that every student has that guaranteed experience, that it's a curricular experience, so it's tied into our curriculum, directly linked to our curriculum. And so our trips, where we started to really go back out into field trips was the residencies. And so our students are all going to have that experience before the end of the year. K through 8 is where we focus. At the high school, we've had conversations on like, what would it look like that we hit the most kids and it's not all the same kids going on the same trips, right? So we've had those conversations at the high schools in particular because it just looks different there. So we really have tried to tighten it up, but we do have boundaries, right? I mean, when you think of when we get into the heat of competitions for sports, there's a lot going on at that time, and so we have to also balance then if we need a lot of buses to go for one grade level to go out, it may not be the day we can do it. And so it's a regular conversation weekly on what trips are going out, but there's more than just nursing as a boundary for it. Transportation also plays a role in it as well.
Thank you both, that's very helpful. It's interesting, no matter what committee we're talking about, there's always that balance between sort of organic things that come up through the school and then also having consistency of offerings and consistency across the district. So that's actually very helpful for me to frame it because this is another one of those examples where we're trying to ensure consistency and across. So thank you.
Are there any other questions on field trips? Go ahead.
Page 20, the general procedures and rules for chaperones, number 3. I was looking at those two statements and the disruptive conversations and disruptive interactions. And I'm just wondering, it seems very vague, and I wonder, is it purposely vague or is it something that needs to be defined a little bit more?
It may need to be, when volunteers and chaperones are being oriented, probably needs to be explained. I don't think it needs to, wouldn't recommend you make it any more detailed in this regulation, though.
Okay.
if parents are not sure what constitutes a disruptive conversation, we would rather they asked us, before they engage in anything that might be resembling.
Okay, and that could be part of the AR then, is what you're saying?
This is in the AR. This is the AR.
Is this AR? Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
this is the AR.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
No, it'd just be
Right.
part of whatever instructions volunteers are given when they, right before they get on the bus, I assume.
Okay.
It's not my understanding that volunteers are handed this regulation before they become chaperones and said, here, read this regulation. It's more along the lines of, here are the do's and don'ts.
Right.
Don't get into a power struggle with a kid.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Hello, community. Would you like to provide any input on this policy or AR?
Jill Altschuler, Marion Station. Would it, not about the field trips, would it be okay to comment on something that I think I missed on the gifted education? Or is that, if not,
Prior, right?
yeah, I think so, page 13, I guess. I guess I'm just curious. Not accommodations, I don't know what the word is, for gifted students at the high school level, besides the instructional support lab, or, no, it's academic seminar, sorry. Are there, I was just talking to someone who has a gifted child, or in that program, and seems to think that that's the only thing that's available. I'm wondering, on top of that, she was telling me that AP classes are no longer going to be available to 10th grade students. And
I believe that, I heard that from a student, actually. That's a rumor. That
Oh.
isn't true.
well, actually, no, she heard it from the guidance counselor, or I think she sent an email to Dr. Johnson and maybe to you as well. I don't know if you saw that. She's a 9th grader who has a GIEP and is getting has 104 in, between a 98 and 104 in all the classes, and was told that there aren't enough resources for 10th graders to take AP classes. They're not going to be.
You could send her my way. We're not stopping
Okay.
10th grade from taking
Okay, I
AP
will.
courses.
She'll be
Yeah.
happy to hear that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, you just came in. I just wanted to make sure that you got the packet of information.
Okay, thank you. I'm brand new.
Okay, hi, welcome.
Hi, Anna. Anna Wood.
Okay. Did you have any questions or comments?
My daughter, I have 2 children. One's in.
Yeah, I just want to let you,
Yeah.
I just want to let you know, this meeting is being
Policy.
being recorded and live streamed.
I have nothing to hide.
Okay, I just,
Certainly.
If you want to bring up anything specific about your kids, we can talk about it after also.
I feel like what I have to say is fairly general. So I have 2 children, nothing to hide here. One's in nursery school, one's in 2nd grade. I'm fairly new in the school district as a result of having small children. I myself work in mental health. I'm an adult psychiatric nurse practitioner. I work with serious mental illness. And I have been concerned about my daughters entering school because of the environment that children are in these days. And just kind of been very sensitive to her experiences, listening out for any issues, trying to help nurture her so that she feels heard and supported and valued. And, on the news I hear about, various mass casualty events, which I think that everybody in our community has, feels strongly about, I'm sure. And This year, although unfortunately this is not the first time my child has experienced horizontal violence, there have been quite a number of bullying and harassment type episodes. And, in my family, I teach my children kindness, number one. We are very interested in academics, working hard and doing well academically and intellectually. Both my husband's and my side of the family are. But more so than academics, I want my child to feel happy and whole, nourished, and well supported by her community. And I always teach my daughter that, yes, I want you to work hard in school and do the best you can, but number one, be kind. And everywhere you go, you spread kindness, because that's the most important thing for you to do. So when my daughter has experienced these types of events, I have been upset because, I would hope, and her teachers have told me too, that she does what I tell her to do. She's very polite, she's very kind, and yet still, unfortunately, I think, because she's a tender bit of a thing, that she gets harassed sometimes. So I don't want that to go on for her forever, and I have spoken up to her. We have her in a very good school district. My husband went to school in this school district, and he will tell you amazing things about the school district. It's the best, and go on and so forth and so forth. And I understand that academically that may be the case. However, I feel that we have, it's important to us to nourish our children emotionally, most importantly, because I feel like if all of our children feel happy and whole and well, they will all do well, every single one of them. Academically, if they feel nourished and supported and cohesive as a community, that's when they'll really shine. All of them. And I feel like the harassment and bullying comes because there's an inherent sense of dissatisfaction amongst the children. And I, would like to get to the bottom of that. So, and then most recently, I just maybe a week or two ago was notified by Toby Albanese that my daughter received a note threatening to take her life. Another child in the class threatened to kill my child. And I'm sure that you can imagine how scary that was for me as a parent and for my daughter. And not only that, but, in the news we hear about children who are the, who go into schools with guns and cause these mass casualty type events. There were always signs. It's not that it just happened out of the blue. There were, doodles in notebooks. There were whispers mentioned to their classmates and things like that. And we always think about, how did these school districts let this go on? And so when this happened with my daughter, we had a phone conference almost immediately with the principal, my husband, myself, and I, and we were saying, what are we going to do about this? Because we're not just going to sit on this. We're not just going to be another news story that there were these, rumors about this, there were these notes about this, there were these things about this, and we did nothing but business as usual. So, I was made aware that the child would probably have some kind of, IEP, wraparound therapeutic support. Great. I do work with people who have serious mental illness, and I do understand that such characteristics can be sort of, abnormal and atypical, and to have one person have wraparound therapeutic support's wonderful. However, just because people have sort of antisocial traits doesn't mean that they're not more sensitive to the greater environment. And so I feel like it's our duty as a school district to make sure that all people have a better environment, because we're all part of the same petri dish. And so I did write an email suggesting various initiatives that I feel like would be small seeds that we could introduce into the educational environment that would help children feel heard and seen and well. I don't know if you all saw my letter. I think I had 5 or 6 initiatives that I recommended. Weekly yoga, meditation, mindfulness, a community garden. You know, it's kind of hard to have an outside community garden this time of year, but I did notice there are quite a nice spread of plants here. And, you know, things like that kind of show kids that, yes, academics are important, but you are important, and you are more important than the academics. And when you shine inside of you, everybody will do well, and everybody will do well academically. So I hoped that after all this, things would not just be business as usual, and that we would see a bit of action. I don't think that the initiatives that I recommended would take that much time from the curriculum. I think they would be easily folded in, and I do hope that they're taken seriously.
I'm sorry you've had that experience, and I'm sorry your daughter's had that experience. And I welcome you to the policy committee. I think there's a lot of people like you, parents like you, that have concerns, whether it's post-COVID related or just escalating. You know, we saw this pre-COVID, some mental health concerns with our students. And so one of the things that we've been, I mean, we have a number of programs that are in place, and we can maybe, you know, offline talk about that and how that might connect to some of the work that you were proposing. I also know that you know, we're working towards a frame, you know, establishing some common language and under a framework of what we call multi-tiered systems of support. And one aspect of that is social emotional learning and behavior supports. And so we too agree that, you know, it's most important. We've used the word belonging a lot. I think it connects to what you've said. So we are, you know, working very intentionally around making sure every student feels connected through having that sense of belonging. And that may look different for different students. So we definitely have targeted that as an important foundational piece of our work. Is before academics, it's important that students feel like they have a connection and belong to the community, because that's going to yield results academically, from a safety standpoint. So I think, you know, I'd you know, be happy to talk to you a little bit more about, you know, just some of the district's in place practices and programs, but also maybe how some of what you're proposing connects to the work that we see, you know, moving forward.
So I do hear that intellectually we are all on the same page, and theoretically we are all on the same page, but I do want to see your action initiatives in clear language disseminated to the community.
We hear that, and we've heard that, and we continue to work on that. So there are places that we have done that, and it's ongoing work. So
I do. So for instance, I think one of the things that you're talking about is, you know, the parents did get an email earlier in the year that the languages, for instance, were being removed from the curriculum. And in place of that, we had guidance counselor support, Ms. Brown, for instance, at our school, and then also the STEM learning. And I do see that I was very excited about that. Again, working in mental health, I was like, great, there's real attention being spent on this. And I'm sure that, you know, even Dr. Albany has mentioned there has been a vast uptick in horizontal violence amongst the students. Unfortunately, since COVID, the trauma of COVID, you know, really impacted our community. So when these various episodes of, you know, child bullying have gone on, I emailed the school and I asked that the guidance counselor, Ms. Brown, reach out to my daughter in particular, but I was very underwhelmed by the response. She kind of would tell me that she kind of peeked in on my daughter and she seemed fine. And then that same day, my daughter came home in tears about the same person that I asked her to talk to about something had happened again. And so, you know, if that had been me in this school and a parent wrote me a worried note, I would take a minute of my time and go say, hey, is everything going on? And talk to a child. What's going on? Could you please tell me about this? Have a brief conversation, call the two children together, let's talk about it so that everybody's on the same page. And we all know, you know, the parents are, the school's aware of this, let's all come together and have some actionable change here. And I don't know if she is being overutilized in other areas, like there's so much going on.
Yeah, I think regarding how staff is being utilized in the school, I recommend that a conversation with the principal would be a good place to start. And if that's already happened and there's details you'd like to talk about, I'd be happy to do that offline. All I want to say is we have, and I do want to hear your concerns. We have on the agenda some additional items today, including
I appreciate your
an
time.
update on the student wellness policy, which may be of interest to you.
Okay.
Okay, so if we can, we'll do that and then maybe connect.
Yes, I'm sorry, I missed the introductory part. I was taking my daughter to school. What is your name?
I'm Megan Schaefer.
Megan.
This is Acting Superintendent Megan Schaefer.
We don't
Nice
have
to meet you.
All right, nice to meet you.
Oh, well, can I just welcome Anna? She and I have been talking offline, and I had invited her today because we were working on the wellness policy. So part of if we could look through the lens of what she's talking about when we're talking about the policy. Thanks.
Yes, and we just finished home education, is that? We didn't know we finished. Field trips and
We were just starting
extracurricular activities, which is on page 22. I'd also note that the administrative regulation that starts on page 41 that's connected to 114 is also part of this grouping of revisions that relate to access, and in just updating that language around ensuring that we have the terms defined. So because we're going to go back to that again, and it feels like I should have said that in connection with our conversation about 114. So that being said, 124 is that additional revisions to extracurricular, the page 25. That change relates to those ensuring equal access that we've already talked about. And then the additional changes on this policy page 27 and 29, which I have an asterisk there that we need to just refine for the purposes of this conversation, relate to the home education changes that we touched on that are in connection with Act 55, correct? I'm looking.
136 is correct. That's
Yeah.
that's Act 150. That is Act 55, yes. Can you
Anything
more on
else you'd
that?
like to add to that?
Yeah. The Act 55, just as a reminder, is the law that says that school districts are required to allow students who do not home educated students to attend class in the district to the extent that the class is a co-curricular experience. For example, a student wants to participate in band or choir or journal, newspaper, whatever, a class an activity that has a curricular component to it. And the student wants to participate in the activity, they've got to be permitted to also participate in the co-curricular class. So that's what that says. There's limits as to how much of a school day a home educated student can be in attendance. Unfortunately, the way the law was written, it's ambiguous. We think it's basically like a quarter of the day, but we're waiting for additional guidance. But we're taking the position that it's basically limited to the co-curricular classes.
So on that, for example, on that chart, page 29, it would be yes, sort of with an asterisk that says, with the Act 55 parameters included or referenced. Is that
I'm sorry.
correct?
I'm not understanding.
Yeah, page 29, with the chart,
Yeah.
where the revision.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
That's the one we talked about earlier.
Yep. Yes.
So home educated students that pound reference would say something to the effect of within the rules and regulations of Act 55.
What page are you on?
I'm on page 29, but the pound is on page 30. Or hashtag.
Yeah, we took out that language to make it clear that there,
Does it need to refer to the law, I guess, is what?
I mean, we can, it doesn't, yeah, we can.
Okay.
do that.
But at this time, we can say that our interpretation, or the way we are interpreting it, is to be, to reference co-curricular activities.
Yep, this is,
Or applied to co-curricular activities.
this document, this particular document, is just a cheat sheet. So
Right.
the stuff about referring to the law and all that stuff, that's elsewhere. I don't know that, for example, I mean, if it's helpful to whoever's referring to, the quick cheat sheet to know that it's Act 55, included, I don't know why they would care, though. Okay.
But we could, I think we could do
But
both.
it's covered in the AR.
Yeah.
This is just it's just like I said, it's just a cheat sheet.
I think it could be helpful in this moment where we're still sort of
Sure.
teasing through language to say, in accordance with, like, we're interpreting Act 55 for this purpose to refer to the way we offer co-curricular activities.
And we might want to add on page 6, so page 30 it is, I'm sorry, on page 30 where we're talking about like the hashtag, we might want to add just a sentence about co-curricular classes. So we took out language in its specific to activities when you look at it. So we might want to put something in that they're also eligible to take the associated co-curricular class with the activity.
Can I ask a question around scope? So band and chorus in our schools are a class, but you can also, if it doesn't fit in your schedule, you can participate sort of during lunch and learn in a modified way. What other things fall under that? I'm just trying to get a sense of scope.
It could be, so I got to think through our course guide, but it could be something like a theater class or, which we're not offering, like there's an IB theater that's not running, but something like that would be, if it ran, would be something that would be appropriate. It could be a journalism class if it's going to lead to something like the Marionite or, so it could be things like that too. It doesn't only have to apply to music and band. I have to now go through, we're waiting for definition on this, so I'll have to go through and look at what classes will apply from a co-curricular standpoint. So we know what students can enroll in or not enroll in outside of band and orchestra, and chorus, which just innately match up. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on to home education 136, which Mr. Roos already touched on. These revisions we looked at. I think we had this in our packet the last time, but didn't move it forward. So I think with some additional revisions that were made, just updating, it looks like a little bit of language. We're proposing to move this forward, again, in accordance with our current interpretation of Act 55. There's no other changes in here other than some language updates. They all relate to Act 55, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. I believe you had a recommendation, Dr. McGloin, for an adjustment in this based on...
Just in looking at it, I felt like we probably should move, now I have to find what if you look at page 37, where it says the Board of School Directors shall provide proper hearing as follows, the next thing is on textbooks. So I felt like that should probably move to after the hearing, because then the next is the right of hearing. I just think those sections should be flipped. Because when it talks about the hearing and it says as follows, then it should go right into the hearing, and then we can talk about textbooks after that. It's just from yeah. So that was my recommendation. It's confusing, right? And so because textbooks don't really have to do with the hearing, and so that was my thought.
On page 34, I appreciate the addition of the reference around the criminal offense thing that I had questioned last time, so that's helpful to have, so that people have a place to refer to.
Okay. I think we're,
You know,
We're
Other
just
question- other
leafing
questions?
through, but I don't
Yeah, I
think
didn't think
there's
there
any
was a
questions.
response needed.
so we'll,
We should ask if there's community comment.
sure, absolutely.
Is there any comment on this policy or AR? Okay, thank you.
Nitpicky on page 39, the second paragraph of add full-time, it should be dashed.
What is it?
The full-time students?
Second paragraph, yeah.
Oh, second one.
With that, just to run through the first readings, we have 114, 124, and 136. All have been revised and will be moving forward with a first reading. Correct? The next item on the agenda is the administrative regulation associated with 114 that I was mentioning earlier on page 41. Again, the revisions here are consistent with what we've discussed related to 114, updating the language specifically. Is there any other thing you wanted to add?
Well, there's also this paragraph that's intended to address the problem that happens when parents are not responsive to notifications about changes to the service agreement. So that was language I
page-
believe added
Page 48.
on page 49. Well, it starts on page 48. That's something that's clarification the district wanted. Finally, they're also.
On page 41, there's one section that refers to IDEIA. I think it's IDEIA. Under B, the sixth line down.
Well, as I said here earlier, either's correct. I mean,
It says IDEIA.
oh, you're right, it should be IDEIA.
Okay, that's all I meant.
Okay.
So you were on page 49.
So to clarify, if the district believes that there should be a change to the 504, and the parents are non-responsive after 3 notifications, the district can make that change? Is that how I'm reading that?
Yeah, the team, yes, you are correct. And the parent will have been provided with their procedural safeguards on how to challenge it if they don't like the change. I mean, this doesn't happen very often, I don't believe, but it does happen enough that you don't want the district to be paralyzed in terms of making a change when the parent's simply been just not responsive. If there's a change that needs to be made for the benefit of the child, and the parents have been given repeated notice of it, at some point, the district's allowed to make the change unilaterally. And this is, as I said, this is language that was approved by the Office of Civil Rights.
Thank you.
So we'll move that.
There is at the end too, on page 51, there's a notice about where to go to file a complaint, which is on the procedural safeguards notice that the parents get. So this is not new information or a change in practice, but it was added to the regulation.
Are there any other questions or comments on this? Go ahead.
On page 49, the should we add to the end of that the end parents will be notified of this change? Even though they've been notified and they haven't responded, if we make that change, there should be some notification, say that we will notify them that they made the change in accordance with prior messaging or something to that effect.
I think that's inherent in the rest of the paragraph, and I would be very reluctant to change any language in this regulation now that it's been approved by Office of Civil Rights.
Oh, okay, I didn't realize that, okay. I
Yeah.
will.
Are there any community comments on this?
So there are four discussion items before we get to the last page of your packet, which is the policy student rights and responsibilities and the policy discriminatory harassment, bullying, and hazing. We've spent a lot of time working on those over the last couple years. There are some, what I would say, adjustments to some of the language that we'd like to make. Obviously, these are pretty robust policies and ARs, so I wanted to give you the vision for it before we commit to the work, which we'd like to try to do before the end of this year so that we can, again, package and communicate it out for the purposes of next year. One is that the discriminatory harassment, bullying, and hazing policy has a requirement that we review it every so often, so it was going to be up for review every 3 years. Thank you. And so it was going to be up for review anyway. We've had some discussions about embedding that into the students' rights and responsibilities policy so that it's all connected to when we talk about expectations and consequences and ways to handle from both, following an incident, supportive measures that can be put in place and build those into one standing policy. So that was the vision. So once we bring it back and do both things at the same time. Also, one of the things that has emerged sort of as a consistent theme is use of technology and devices in school buildings, namely cell phones, and put some more explicit language in that rights and responsibilities policy around the authority of the school, the teachers, the principals, to say this is what we can expect students to do with a cell phone for it. I'll give an example. The way it's framed now is more of a disciplinary, like you do something wrong with your cell phone or create disruptive behavior, then there's a consequence, as opposed to saying we empower our teachers to say, hey, if we have a cubby for cell phones, that during the class period, there's an expectation that they go in that cubby. So we want to empower some of that, so those behaviors, so that teachers and our school staff feel the ability to have that kind of control because of such the disruptive factor that they've become in not only just having them in the day-to-day, but even in classrooms. So if we can start to control some of that usage without taking them away entirely, this is not about that, this isn't that proposal. This proposal is to take a step in the direction of maybe some healthier and safer practices in school buildings. And I think one way to do that is be more affirmative about what teachers can expect and what our administrative staff can ask for in terms of those devices in our school buildings. So I'd like to see some language, or would like to propose some language around that into that 235 policy. So again, I wanted to share it out as a vision and see if you had any immediate feedback to that, and so we can bring it back to you in April with that sort of packaged that way.
Conceptually, it makes sense to me that the bullying piece is within the student rights responsibilities. Like, I think that's where it belongs. But also, is there a way to make it easily searchable, right? So that I'm not sure that as a parent, that's where I would go to look, like, oh, I think something's going on with my kid. What are the rules around that, or what's going on? I'm not sure that's where I would look. And so how do we still have something that's sort of a policy that says it, like almost a placeholder, that, you know, this is what it was and this is where you should look now? Or is there a way to have it searchable? Right, I think that there needs to be something that identifies it so that it's easy to get to.
So I just, for, sake of curiosity, typed bullying into the search feature of our website, and what comes up is, the first hit is bullying prevention from our counseling, and the second one is a link to the bullying policy. So just putting the word bullying into the website brings you pretty much right to the policy.
Right, but I'm saying if we take it and put it into students' rights and responsibility, there wouldn't be a separate bullying policy. So that
Yes, I've also had sort of some similar concerns about how do we do that, and maybe even if it's, to your point, like a placeholder, so there's almost like a blank policy that says, student concerns or parent concerns, and then it refers, or I think it's a communication piece, but I share that we don't want to lose, I think, because I think it's consistent with the law to ensure that our families and students, importantly, know what to do if they feel like they're subject to harassment or bullying. So we don't want to bury the lead.
right.
This problem will solve itself if and when you eventually migrate your policies into board docs, because board docs will find it whether it's in the policy title or not. But in the meantime, you could always just, under policy 235, you could always just break out the subheadings too.
I kind of like that too. We could call that out on the website. So we've done that in a couple other, for a couple other policies. So the AR specifically says, like, this section, maybe it's another -3, 235-3, bullying, harassment, and call it out separately within that policy or something like that. Like I said, I think it's a communication piece, but I hear that. I agree with that.
And even just having a placeholder policy, I think, is, right, that says, it's a paragraph or a couple of sentences that says, we know this is very important, this is where you can find it.
As far as the phone use, can we put it on like silent, or I just worry about kids feeling safe. The cell phone usage.
Yes, that is the tension that we certainly hear. And so just as a quick, sometimes what we've trained on and are aware of, that cell phones can actually be more disruptive in an emergency or crisis situation. That said, we recognize, myself being a parent and having that, my teenagers in high schools, like I get that concern. So at this point, the strategy isn't to say, like, you can't have a phone in school with you, but if you're in a classroom, there can be a designated space within that classroom, meaning that if there was a situation, it would be nearby. That's the idea, that, that, again, this is a first step, and I thought that kind of bridges that concern without it being like, we're locking, because some schools do that, they lock up a phone, like you arrive at school and here's the cell phone caddy, and it's away for the entire day. That's not what's being proposed here. It's being just, again, more affirmative, so we feel so that our staff feels like they can give that direction so that it doesn't become that what it is, the attractive nuisance during a class period or another designated period where they should be attending to something other than their phones in that moment. So that's the design, but I hear that too, yeah. Yes. So if we're okay, just hearing those comments, we'll start to craft something, and being mindful of when we bring it back, we'll talk about how it looks like on the website, how it looks as a, the access that families would have and students. Okay.
Are there any questions or community comment? Can you walk up to the microphone, please?
Hi, Anna Wood again from Marion Station. I did like everything that I heard. I like the idea of the cubby. I feel like, if it's out of your hands, then children won't use that. Of course, there's always a way deviant behavior will occur, as much as you try to subdue it, unless you have an overarching, ideology disseminated to the children. And so I do like that you would put it in very clear statements, on on the school website, like an anti-bullying, like in big bright letters, like this is what we're working on. We are not doing this. And like very clearly tell the children, we will not be engaging these behaviors. We need to have like an action statement, like this is what we stand for, like you have the Pledge of Allegiance for America. We need this is what we stand for. We stand for what is right, what is good, being a strong community because we're better together. And something that's like our mission statement that we sort of reinforce to the children and repeat on a daily basis so that that's what's on their mind first and foremost.
So just an example from the other day at our curriculum committee meeting when they were talking about MTSS, the multi-tiered systems of support. The example was from high school, but the example was, so it's RAM Pride and then ACEs, and it's accountability character. I don't have it in front of me. Right, but it's exactly that idea. It's this is what we stand for as a school, and it was, it was specific to each school. They had their own.
I like that little cutesy mnemonic. I feel like we have to be very clear with children, very clear language, that this is what we're doing and this is what we are not doing, and have a very clear mission statement. So whatever you can do to craft that.
I would support, I know at that same meeting, I was thinking the same thing when you spoke, that they did show that there was different ways of, when you're looking for PBIS, which is a component of MTSS, is putting the common language out there and setting the rules so that everybody
Right.
And that's where they're moving towards. They were talking about moving towards that.
100%, because clearly we're not being clear enough. And they're picking up on these subconscious cues from their adults, from their community, that it's okay to be this way, to have this hierarchical pecking order. And quite frankly, it's not okay. And it's up to us to stand up and say in very clear language, we do not accept this, we do not promote this, and we'll tell you why it doesn't work, because we are better together. And when we work together, we all shine better as a community. And one day when you grow up and you graduate from this community, and you'll be proud that you were part of this community action that we have, and we're not just constantly taking each other down.
When my daughter was in elementary school, the principal there had the RESPECT program, which taught the kids, each letter had, it's kind of it stood for something, although it came out of, instead of being a positive way, it was like a punishment if you didn't follow it, rather than promoting it.
That's the problem.
And that's what we just have to be careful that when we put the program, anything like that in, it has to be out of a positive slant rather than a negative.
Yeah.
Right. So let me just, so that is the direction that we have been moving in, and it isn't just about a RAM Pride and I'm talking about the high school ACEs, but what you didn't see for the ACEs, because we had a large presentation, is that we actually talk about what does it look like in the bathroom, what does it look like in the hallways, all from a positive lens, because the positive slant to it is really important. That's that positive behavior. It's not don't, but it's what we expect instead.
Exactly.
And teaching those expectations are a really big piece of it as well. So we've had a lot of conversations on, in the beginning of the school year, how are we teaching students how we want them to behave?
Right.
And I'll give an example, like Belmont Hills just did a whole assembly again on, they do bark at their school, and it was like, what does bark look like on the bus? And so it is continually reinforcing and teaching those positive behaviors, but we're moving in that direction. It's happening. You just didn't see that next level because we had a large presentation. But that's happening through our elementaries, our middle, and our high school. And we're not all the way there yet, but we're continuing to grow in that area.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, I think painting for the kids a picture of the society that we want, that's what we need to do in very clear language. And like, this is what we want you to do. Let's work on this team building, community building. We're in this together.
Thank you. I agree with much of what you've said. And it's not that I don't agree, I just want to, like, I agree with what you've said. I think we're aligned with your vision in terms of what we want for students as well. So this sort of leads into the final item that's, well, no, it's not the final, but an update item, which is the student wellness policy that we've been working on. We currently have a student wellness policy, as we've talked about. It's more of a compliance-based policy focusing on nutrition and physical activity. We've long viewed student wellness as to be a more holistic concept that we want to memorialize in policy now. So we've been working through some subcommittee work and also some shopping the purpose or the vision around, so we get feedback from a variety of representative groups across the district. And we've done this exercise a few times, and this has continued to refine the purpose statement, which is on page 53. That purpose statement has allowed us to start to identify terms that need some definitions. So we build that bank of common language together with driving sort of the action items, that delegation of responsibility piece of a policy that we often see. We saw it earlier today in one of, I think, several of these policies, but that will drive the creation of an administrative regulation that will, I think, more holistically and comprehensively capture a lot of what we're already doing, but also guide our work, keep the vision of where we want to go with the work. Both our public comments today, I think, spoke to that. So we, our next step, and I've been coordinating some time in the near future to complete a draft of some of these terms and those directional statements that we will share with our writing subcommittee early next week, and have, the plan is to have a meeting scheduled late next week or the beginning of the following week, so that subcommittee can look at a more expanded proposed policy, get their feedback, because it's always easier to start with some language in front of you in terms of the writing process. So it'll be some proposed language so that we'll continue to refine that piece as well. So again, try to do another cycle of, once we get that expanded version, to other groups to again get some feedback there. So our mission is to have this updated policy in place by the end of this year. And so we're still on schedule, I think, to accomplish that. If there are any, comments about this updated purpose statement, again, it's being massaged. We have different, updated versions of it as we move along. But any comments you have about that or the process? Go ahead.
I appreciate the work that's gone into this. It was at the last Equity and Anti-Racism Committee meeting where there were breakout groups, and that was very valuable to me, my little breakout group, just that conversation and what different people, sort of what jumped out at people and what they took away from it. And so I think that work is really useful and helpful. And so I appreciate that the work that's going into it.
And just before you were talking about cell phones, and made me think about something to add to that is healthy technology habits. And there's a lot of talk about mental health and technology and use of technology.
Jill Altschuler, Marion Station. Before my wellness policy comment, just wanted to backtrack a little about the clear language and expectations for, in terms of bullying, and that also occurs kind of on the parent, community, caregiver level, as you probably have either heard or seen on, the Facebook pages, and I think you've all received an email from Janice and Allie Lou Brown and I and a few others at the community dialogue that we're organizing that I think is hopefully in a series of dialogues a good first step to kind of lead by example and learn how to have these conversations. And, we want the students to be invited as well. And I'm hoping you all saw the email and hopefully mark your calendar, because I think we all need to show commitment to, what we want our community to be like. And the other, so there's that. I think that kind of relates to what Anna was saying. And in terms of the draft purpose, I was wondering who else, besides the Equity and Anti-Racism Committee meeting, who else you've kind of tried to get feedback from for the draft purpose?
We're still working on getting some student feedback. We've had our administrators, we've had staff give feedback on it. We had the larger Wellness Council give feedback on that. And I'm probably missing.
Have you gotten student feedback?
I said we're still working on that student feedback piece.
Yeah, I didn't know if you received any yet. Or,
okay. It's been delegated, so I don't have that report with me right now, but I can. I certainly will. We can talk next week when we convene as a writing committee.
Okay. Do we have a meeting scheduled?
I mentioned that we're going to schedule that either by the end of next week or the beginning of the following week. So I just wanted to make sure we had something to work on. So I was trying to calendar when we could connect. So you can anticipate an invite probably in the next, probably today.
Okay. And is there any chance of having students actually on the wellness committee, as that's actually like part of the policy, that students and even a board member would be on the committee itself?
I don't think anything precludes us from doing that, and I'm happy to have a discussion about how we make that work.
Okay.
If that's possible.
Thanks.
So I like what I am hearing here. Anna Wood again from Marion Station, and I appreciate your time. I was wondering, so a lot of these things that we're talking about, I feel like are targeting sort of the older audience, that like teenagers or, people who have, higher levels of thinking, but the small ones. So let me just start here. I was wondering if maybe we could make this very inclusive of the community and ask the children to draw pictures of what they think respect is all about, or like community vibes are all about, and then we put it in like a kid handbook. Because I think it's important, I think the teenagers are going to be able to read a handbook, but honestly, teenagers don't even want to sit through and comb through like a 35, page handbook. But if we made it like a really cute, artsy, like people draw their own pictures from grades K through 12 even, because we have some really great artists, and then maybe do like poems, make it like an art project for the entire community, and we kind of all come together and be like, this is what community means to me, and this is like pictures and poems and words, and then everybody's a part of it, and it's like a beautiful thing that they can keep forever.
You mentioned handbooks, so that got me excited. So we spent a lot of work on handbooks, and one of, again, I think we have a good place to start. One of the other sort of next steps in the evolution of that was to, I mean, it's supposed to be a family handbook. I know we're talking about student wellness, but anything we do does get sort of interpreted for the age-appropriate audience once, you know, in implementation. So this vision statement is supposed to be sort of like a all-encompassing, agreed that this probably isn't going to be read the same way by a first or second grader than it is an adult, but we would take this and make sure that in implementing the work, it's at an age-appropriate level. I like your ideas. I think that in terms of like how we communicate rules and expectations looks differently, and there are ways to do that through like the ways you describe. So I don't, again, think that we're not aligned with your thinking. I think
Yeah,
they're good
and
ideas.
I know you're already sort of working on this, but like I was talking with the principal of my daughter's school that these levels of violence are starting at earlier and earlier ages. I mean, you know, where was it, Virginia, where the 6-year-old shot his teacher? So clearly, I mean, 6-year-olds can have thoughts like this, like severe thoughts. And I think just to do something like very basic, like you can make your higher level thinking handbook, but then also do like a small, you know, 10-page thing if you really want, if you want to make it smaller and just have, I don't know if you want to partner with like one parent in the community who can do some art, or, I mean, I think it'd be nice to have the kids do it and just everybody draw a picture and then pick, like it's a contest, and just pick like your, you know, favorite pictures or whatever it is, and just put it in like a small handbook that the kids can take home and be like, this is what this means, and make it nice so that it's not just going to fray and stuff and get thrown in the trash, but something that's sort of like they work on for the rest of the year or maybe next year, where, you know, it's like an art contest, and then it's, you know, and put the kids, so the kids are all like, you know, get their dopamine going behind this project and things like that, so they really like believe it and hold with them forever. Thank you.
One last, this was identified as a non-substantive revision that we had made to policy 217 that I believe Mr. Roos would agree we don't need to take it through a first and second read, but wanted to bring it to your attention.
I agree.
You're looking at me. So remember that this year is the first year that we have state requirements for students beyond what you see in the policy with regard to either Keystone exams or a pathway for graduation. And so students have to meet a pathway for graduation. That continually makes some adjustments. And so even next year, the pathways will change a little just because of when students were taking Keystone exams and we're not taking Keystone exams. And so having it be broad like this allows us to say, you have to meet state requirements as well, which are beyond our requirements now. So we'll be there. Our students will meet their state requirements. We've been working on it a lot. And I feel confident that we're at a good place, but we definitely, it's the first year that students have new requirements. Ms. Schaefer, do you want me to just preview?
I just wanted
Go
to
ahead.
ask, how does this kind of weave itself into the career and technical program change that we made? Okay, sorry.
Yeah. Remember last year what we did with it was we brought in the scope of what could count towards credit so that we can make the adjustments. That's where you saw that weaving in of our career tech last year. So our requirements remain the same, but we have flexibility on what counts towards those requirements. The principals have the authority to align that. And they've been working with Dr. King to make that happen as well. So we could talk about, you know, which of the careers they're choosing, and then what courses would align with that. And so there's some more flexibility for students with principal approval.
Great, thank you.
So the minimum 21 credits, those are state mandated or those are what we think?
Our district we'll be back with some addition, not right now, but we're working on changing some of this language, and we'll probably at least go to 21.5. The state requires 21 total credits, and so we meet the minimum state graduation requirements in our district. We don't require beyond that, but we do because we also require, remember the graduation project is a 0.5 credit, so it's truly a 21.5. But we meet state requirements, yes, we're not beyond that. So what we've done as a district and what we're doing right now is we're looking at what other districts are requiring, how many credits around us, even including some districts out in Pittsburgh that we usually compare ourselves to. We're taking a look at those requirements. We're taking a look at GPA right now, and the weighted averages. We have a pretty substantial weighting in our school district, and so we're comparing that to other districts as well. If you recall the conversation a long time ago about what counts towards GPA and what does not count towards GPA, we're trying to resolve all that finally and come back to the board with some recommendations. We're not there yet. We're really in the infancy of taking that back on again. But just as a reminder as well, there is no salutatorian or valedictorian starting this school year. And so part of our work really right now is also how are we having students qualify for those Latin designations, and we're working on that as well. So there is a lot of behind the scenes going on right now in regard to what counts towards graduation credits, and GPA as well. Yeah.
Thank you. So this is just, I guess, tangential. So there's like the civics requirement, but that's not a course you have to take. It's just something you have to meet. And then am I correct that there's also a U.S. government? Is that a state thing? Is that a school thing?
So the state has standards that are required, right? And civics and government are part of those standards that are required. How we meet our state standards is a decision at the local level. So, and we've decided that we meet them through our history courses, and we've added in a government class. Not every district has a government class. Sometimes they have a half credit versus a full credit or no credit at all. For us, that's been a priority and an important priority for us. What is mandated by the state is that assessment. So we have to have an assessment for our students. It's a government assessment. We have to give the state our results. We could use a state mandated assessment. We created our own, which was fine as well, but we have to give our results at the state level. So that's what is mandated. The state usually mandates more of an assessment versus, I've not seen like you have to teach this course. You have to meet the standards and take assessment, and how we make that happen is a local decision.
Okay. So like that 4 credits in social studies, those are our Global 1, Global 2, and government.
Global 1, Global 2, U.S. history, government.
History, right.
Yeah, there are 4.
Got it. Okay,
but the state only mandates 3 credits, we mandate 4. So we're above that requirement from a state level. They mandate 4 years of an English class and then 3 of math, science, and social studies. Whatever you want it to be, but that's the
Are there
credit.
do a certain number of those need to be a lab class?
They don't specify, but if you're meeting state standards, it's a hands-on approach, and so you have to really incorporate labs just to meet the standards correctly.
Right, so it's 2 different things that interrelate, but they are separate.
Yes.
That's very helpful, thank you.
Yeah.
Jill Altschuler, Marion Station. I'm wondering in terms of the English requirement, 2 questions. One is reminded me about the Central Monco, in which my daughter is going to be doing the Teacher Academy program, hopefully with the start times issue being, letting that happen. And there's some sort of clarity issue on, she was told it counts towards an English requirement, but the guidance counselor is saying it doesn't, so I don't know how that's going to be resolved. And the other thing, also in terms of English, the requirements, I guess it's not clear, do you have to get a certain, like, passing grade to fulfill the requirements for any of the subject areas? And specifically in terms of English, it just occurred to me, I was kind of hoping there it would be cool or important to have like skills assessments, because one area that I've been kind of disappointed in terms of my kids' experiences is learning how to write. And I've noticed they stopped asking me for feedback because I would just be like, I don't know where to begin. And I've reached out to their different English teachers and kind of asked, how they're instructing. There's a decent amount of reading, and I think it definitely varies across middle school and high school which teachers you have or really, dig into the whole writing instruction process. But it really stood out when it came time for college applications, and I just, I feel like that's an important piece for students to be able to really show who they are in that Common App type of essay. And when you can't get that message across, obviously there's a whole range of students who can and those who struggle more, even if they get A's in English. So I didn't know if that could be and I know it has to do with what the state requires, but writing in general, I feel like.
And writing's an integral part of the requirements for English language arts. I feel good about our writing program, truly. We even have a writing center at both high schools that students take advantage of all the time. So your children may actually be going there, which is great. And we have summer programming where we train students to help peer edit. So we have research, and we have research papers in our subject areas, including social studies. So there's a lot of writing that goes on, not just in English, but from a cross-curricular perspective as well. Sometimes it just takes a little time for students to get better at it, just depending on the child, and not everybody is as adept in that area. But I feel confident in the writing process in general. We assess it from a common assessment across the district as well, and then we look at those prompts and we change instructional practice. So it is one of our common areas that we're definitely looking at on a regular basis. Doesn't mean that we can't always continue to grow. The in-service coming up in 9th and 10th grade, they'll be looking at writing prompts, and they'll be scoring them together to make sure that everybody's looking at it with that same lens. So it is a constant area that we're talking about.
Okay. I know my daughter's hardly had any writing so far this year. And the type of writing, if I can recall, that she either had last year or the year before was just a very specific kind. So just like that general 5-paragraph essay type of thing, I don't know. Neither of my kids, had that much instruction. Like, I think it's great that there's the writing, what's it called again? The writing center, yeah. But I feel like whether they take advantage of that is always, an issue. I think my daughter has gone like once or something, but just really starting in the classroom, I know it just varies, I guess, on the teacher, with everything. So, were you going to say something? Oh.
I was going to talk about the college essay, but I will.
Okay.
I from personal experience, I understand that I came out a really poor writer from high school. I could format a 5-by-5 essay like crazy, and what surprised me most when I started in college was, you mean there's more essays than just the 5-by-5 format? Right. But my problem was I didn't understand the difference between an active and passive sentence, and how to structure structure each sentence within it. So there's a lot of things that can affect the way you write that beyond just the scope of how to format. And I'm actually thinking about, we've had this discussion about the ChatGPT thing, and how this is showing a way we could embrace that technology, that each student run their essays through, see how it's changed, and then analyze it and learn a little bit about how writing changes, and by using and embracing the technology. Yeah.
Thanks.
Hi, Anna Wood again, and I know we're trying to wrap up soon, but I have something to speak to regarding Jill's comments. So again, from the emotional, mental health perspective here, I think that some people naturally can verbalize what's going on inside them a little better, and then some of us, probably all of us, have to work on it. But I think that this is what I'm speaking to also, that the kids need to learn how to verbalize what's going on inside them, putting into words the feelings that they're having. And so we may be doing writing that speaks to certain topics, a president, the government, things like that. But I think that they should maybe take time to do essays about themselves, because that's what the college essays are too. It's like, okay, let's hear from you. You've spoken about what the teachers have told you to speak about for so long, but let's hear from you. What are your thoughts and hopes and dreams and ideas? And I don't know if you want to do once a month or once because you have to habitualize things. Once a week, just do a 1 page or whatever you want to do. Just let's hear from you, your thoughts and feelings. A little bit like a suggestion box, although we all know suggestion boxes are largely ignored. But an actual, let's take a minute and write, this week, write a page, these are rough ideas, on your hopes and dreams and concerns. And then you guys can read it and analyze it and see what's going on inside these kids besides just topic-based learning, just as an idea, rough idea.
I think there are examples of that across the district currently where students are encouraged to write about how they're feeling, what they're thinking, what their dreams are, and a lot of that is connected to the social emotional learning that we do in schools. So I think one of the things that we've been talking about is, our limited time here to present all of the things that we do, and we're going to, be very intentional about putting that information together and packaging it for more public consumption so that we can react to what's happening. So there's a baseline of understanding of what we're presenting, and then how do we build up from there, or what critiques exist in the to what we're doing. But I feel like we're still talking about. I feel like we're doing some of the things you're talking about.
Exactly.
Maybe it's just communication piece.
We need some kind of change though, like an anti-retaliation language, like an whistleblower type language. You can. We want to hear your hopes and dreams, but we also want to hear what things you're having a hard time with. And there's a no retaliation policy. We encourage you to share what's going on so that we can fix it. That specific language, I think the kids need to hear, because they don't want to get in trouble. They just want to, be free. Thank you.
I think we're at the end. And
You want to summarize?
I can summarize a piece now.
Say that again?
I can summarize unless you're ready.
I am.
Okay.
I am. Moving for adoption with policy 832 and policy 604, implementation of regulation 604 upon adoption of the policy, administrative regulation to be created with respect to cybersecurity to flesh out some of the details. First readings for the policies, for all of the policies that are listed, and the immediate enactment of AR 114-2. We'll bring back next month policy 235 revised to absorb policy 246, as well as to incorporate the provisions regarding the use of caddies for cell phones or other ways of controlling cell phone use in classroom. The high school graduation requirement administrative regulation will be implemented immediately, and the student wellness policy is in development pursuant to the memo. And then look forward, next month you can look forward, or next or coming months, you can look forward to some of the other policies that are listed.
The high school graduation one was a policy, right?
Correct.
Okay.
That will now be posted as a,
Okay.
as the new policy, the new wording, the new language for policy 137. So it should include what I would call a review date rather than a revision date.
Okay. Go ahead, Denise.
Is that the 121, policy 121?
217.
Okay, so I'm going to jump up to 121, and I thought it was a for review only. What was that?
That's correct.
Okay.
We didn't have any revisions to that, so I don't
Okay,
think
so
it
it
doesn't
would
need
be
to go through.
114, 124, 136 are moving forward as the first reading, and then I'll list it as 121 was reviewed only.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone for attending. The next meeting, because of spring break, will be March 31st. So mark your calendars, it's March 31st, not in April. Thank you. We're adjourned.